Part 1. The stage is set. It was another lively evening on The Five, the popular Fox News show known for its mix of sharp opinions and humor. Greg Gutfeld, one of the hosts, was in his usual spot at the round table. With his quick wit and knack for turning serious debates into moments of levity, he always had a way of keeping things interesting. Tonight, however, the energy in the room felt different. Something was brewing. Joining the panel that day was a guest who had been making waves in political circles, a fiery congresswoman from Texas, known for her bold statements and no-nonsense attitude, had taken her seat. She had recently made headlines for some biting comments she'd directed at a younger Republican strategist. Her words were sharp, dismissive, and carried an air of superiority that didn't sit well with everyone. The topic of discussion? Youth in politics. It was a subject ripe for debate, especially given the growing number of young people stepping into leadership roles. But it wasn't just any ordinary conversation, it was personal. Earlier that week, the Congresswoman had publicly mocked a rising star in conservative circles, a young woman who had been gaining attention for her fresh ideas and outspoken nature. The strategist, though relatively new to the national stage, had already built a solid reputation among her peers. Yet, instead of acknowledging her efforts, the Congresswoman chose to belittle her, calling her inexperienced and out of her depth. As the cameras rolled and the debate began, you could feel the tension in the air. The Congresswoman leaned forward, ready to make her case. She spoke confidently, almost smugly, about how young voices shouldn't be given platforms until they'd earned them. Her tone suggested she believed herself to be the ultimate authority on the matter. Greg Gutfeld, sitting across from her, listened intently. He didn't interrupt or jump in right away. Instead, he let her speak, his expression unreadable. Anyone who knew Gutfeld understood that this silence wasn't a sign of disinterest. It was the calm before the storm. He was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The audience watched closely, sensing that something big was about to happen. They weren't wrong. What unfolded next would go down as one of those unforgettable TV moments where personalities clashed, egos collided, and truths were laid bare. For now, though, all eyes were on the Congresswoman as she continued to lay out her argument, oblivious to the fact that Greg Gutfeld was quietly plotting his next move. Little did she know, her words would soon come back to haunt her in ways she never expected, and when they did, it wouldn't just be her opponent responding. It would be Greg Gutfeld, armed with his trademark humor and razor-sharp logic, ready to turn the tables in spectacular fashion. Part 2. The Provocation. The conversation around the table was heating up, and the Congresswoman from Texas wasn't holding back. She had a reputation for being direct and sometimes harsh, but tonight, her words carried an edge that even her usual supporters might have found hard to ignore. Her target was clear: a young Republican strategist who had been gaining attention for her bold ideas and unapologetic approach to politics. "She's just a kid playing dress-up," the Congresswoman said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Young people shouldn't be handed microphones until they've earned them." The comment drew a few nervous chuckles from some in the audience, but it also left others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the tone. There was something dismissive about the way she said it, as if she believed this young woman's contributions didn't matter simply because of her age. The strategist, watching the show from home, reacted quickly. Within minutes, she fired off a tweet. "Respect goes a long way." It was short, simple, and to the point. But those 5 words struck a chord with her supporters, who flooded social media with messages defending her work ethic, passion, and dedication. Hashtags like earned her spot and youth in politics started trending almost instantly. People were rallying behind her, praising her for standing tall despite the criticism. Back on the show, the Congresswoman seemed unfazed by the backlash. If anything, she doubled down. "Look, I'm not saying young people can't contribute," she clarified, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But there's a difference between having potential and being ready. Some of these kids are in over their heads, and it shows." Her comments sparked a wave of reactions, both online and in the studio. One of the co-hosts chimed in gently, pushing back against her argument. Isn't it possible that younger voices bring fresh perspectives we need? Maybe experience isn't the only measure of credibility. The Congresswoman brushed off the question, insisting that time and effort were non-negotiable prerequisites for influence. Greg Gutfeld, still sitting quietly at the table, watched the exchange unfold. He hadn't said much yet, but his body, language spoke volumes. Leaning back slightly in his chair, he tapped his pen against the desk, his eyes fixed on the Congresswoman. You could tell he was processing every word she said, analyzing it, waiting for the right moment to step in. Meanwhile, the tension in the room continued to build. The audience was divided, some nodding along with the Congresswoman's points, others shaking their heads in disagreement. Social media was ablaze, with viewers weighing in on both sides. Supporters of the young strategist argued that dismissing someone based solely on their age was unfair and counterproductive. Critics of the Congresswoman accused her of gatekeeping, suggesting that her remarks came across as more jealous than constructive. As the segment progressed, it became clear that the Congresswoman's comments weren't just about one person. They were part of a larger narrative. She seemed to view youth in politics as a threat, something to be controlled rather than celebrated. But what she didn't realize was that her words were setting the stage for a showdown. And Greg Gutfeld, ever the master of timing, was biding, his time letting her dig herself deeper before delivering his response. The mood in the studio shifted subtly. The playful banter that usually characterized the five was replaced by a more serious tone. Everyone could sense that something big was coming. When Gutfeld finally leaned forward, microphone in hand, the room went quiet. It was his turn to speak, and no one, not the Congresswoman, not the audience, not even his co-hosts, knew exactly what he was about to say. But one thing was certain: whatever it was, it would leave a mark. Part 3. Enter Greg Gutfeld. The moment Greg Gutfeld leaned forward, the energy in the room changed. Everyone knew he was about to speak, and when Greg spoke, people listened. He wasn't just another voice at the table. He was the guy who could turn a serious debate into a moment of clarity or laughter, often both. Tonight, though, there was no humor in his eyes. His expression was calm but focused, like a chess player who'd been waiting for the perfect move. "All right," he began, his tone measured but firm. "Let's talk about this whole playing dress-up thing." He paused for a second, letting the phrase hang in the air. The Congresswoman shifted slightly in her seat, sensing that she was now the center of attention. Greg continued, "Mocking someone because of their age? That's low-hanging fruit, even for you." The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement. The Congresswoman opened her mouth to respond, but Greg wasn't done yet. He pressed on, his words cutting through the noise. "Here's the thing. You keep talking about experience like it's some magical badge that only certain people can earn. But let's be real. How many young people have had to fight twice as hard to get half the recognition? You think they're handed opportunities? No, they work for them. They hustle. They grind. And yeah, sometimes they make mistakes. But guess what? So do we all." The Congresswoman tried to interject, but Greg held up a hand, signaling he wasn't finished. His body language was relaxed, almost casual, but his words carried weight. "And here's the kicker," he said, leaning in slightly. "You've mocked this person publicly, called her inexperienced, acted like she doesn't belong. But what have you done to lift anyone else up? What mentorship have you offered? What doors have you opened? Because tearing someone down isn't leadership, it's insecurity." The room fell silent. Even the co-hosts seemed caught off guard by how direct Greg was being. This wasn't just a joke or a clever quip. It was a pointed critique delivered with precision. The Congresswoman's face flushed red, and she fidgeted with her notes, clearly unprepared for this kind of pushback. Greg didn't let up. "Young voices aren't a threat, they're an asset. Fresh perspectives challenge us to think differently, to grow. If we shut them out every time they step up, we're not moving forward. We're standing still. And frankly, your attitude feels less like wisdom and more like jealousy." The audience erupted into applause, unable to contain themselves any longer. Social media lit up almost instantly, with viewers praising Greg for calling out the hypocrisy they'd sensed but couldn't quite articulate. Clips of the exchange started circulating online, racking up thousands of views within minutes. People were loving it, not because it was mean-spirited, but because it felt fair. Greg wasn't attacking the Congresswoman personally. He was holding her accountable for her words. For her part, the Congresswoman looked flustered. She tried to regain control of the narrative, stammering something about respecting elders and earning credibility over time. But her argument sounded weak compared to Greg's clear, logical points. It was as if he'd stripped away the layers of rhetoric and exposed the core issue. Dismissing someone based on their age wasn't just unfair, it was counterproductive. As the segment continued, Greg wrapped up his thoughts with a final jab. Look, I'm not saying everyone deserves a platform, but if someone works hard, puts themselves out there, and contributes meaningful ideas, then yeah, they deserve respect. Mocking them doesn't make you look smarter, it makes you look small. The line landed with a thud, leaving the Congresswoman scrambling to recover. For the first time that evening, she seemed unsure of herself, glancing at her notes as if searching for a lifeline. Meanwhile, Greg sat back in his chair, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He had made his point, and he had done it without raising his voice or resorting to personal attacks. It was classic Greg, sharp, thoughtful, and impossible to ignore. The audience loved it. They clapped, cheered, and even whistled in approval. Social media was buzzing, with hashtags like Time One Respect Young Voices and Greg Gets It trending alongside clips of the exchange. Viewers praised Greg for standing up not just for one person, but for an entire generation of young leaders trying to make their mark. Backstage, the young strategist who had been mocked earlier watched the segment unfold. She smiled faintly, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. Greg's words weren't just defending her, they were validating the struggles of countless others like her. It was a reminder that while criticism might sting, having someone in your corner could make all the difference. As the show moved on to the next topic, the tension lingered. The Congresswoman tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the damage was done. Greg Gutfeld had taken her comments, flipped them on their head, and turned the spotlight onto a bigger issue: the importance of respecting and empowering young voices. And in doing so, he had given the audience something to think about long after the cameras stopped rolling. Part 4, The Hypocrisy, highlighted. The room was still buzzing from Greg's sharp remarks, but he wasn't done yet. If anything, he was just getting started. Leaning forward again, he fixed his gaze on the Congresswoman, his tone calm but deliberate. "Let's talk about this idea of earning your spot," he said, his voice carrying a mix of curiosity and challenge. "You're acting like experience is some kind of exclusive club that only people your age can join. But here's the thing, didn't you start out young too?" The Congresswoman froze for a split second, clearly caught off guard by the question. Greg didn't wait for her to respond. "I mean, think about it," he continued. "You didn't wait until you were 50 to step into leadership roles, did you? You went after opportunities early in your career, just like anyone else. And guess what? People probably doubted you back then too. They probably told you that you weren't ready, that you needed more time, but you didn't let that stop you." The audience nodded along, sensing where Greg was going with this. He wasn't just making a point, he was dismantling the Congresswoman's argument piece by piece. "So why are you shutting the door now for someone else?" he asked, his tone tinged with genuine curiosity. "Why are you telling young people they don't belong when you were once in their shoes?" The Congresswoman shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier confidence wavering. She tried to deflect, saying something about how times were different when she started. But Greg wasn't having it. "Different how?" he shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Because the world has changed? Sure it has. But the challenges are still the same. Young people today face even more pressure than ever before. Social media, public scrutiny, the weight of expectations, it's not easy. And yet, they keep showing up, keep pushing forward. Why would you mock them for that?" The tension in the room was palpable. The Congresswoman fumbled for words, her usual quick wit failing her. Meanwhile, Greg pressed on, zeroing in on the heart of the issue. "Here's the truth," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "We all start somewhere. Nobody walks onto the scene fully formed. Experience isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And if we keep tearing down young voices instead of lifting them up, we're not just hurting them, we're hurting ourselves." The audience erupted into applause again, their cheers echoing through the studio. It was clear that Greg had struck a nerve, not just with the Congresswoman, but with everyone watching. His words resonated because they were rooted in fairness and common sense. He wasn't just defending one person. He was speaking for an entire generation of young leaders who had been dismissed, underestimated, or outright mocked simply because of their age. But Greg wasn't finished exposing the contradictions in the Congresswoman's stance. "And let's not forget," he added, a hint of sarcasm creeping into his voice, "you've spent most of this segment talking about how unqualified this young strategist is. But have you actually listened to what she's saying? Have you looked at the work she's done? Or are you just focusing on her age because it's an easy target?" The Congresswoman opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time that evening, she seemed genuinely rattled. Her earlier smugness had evaporated, replaced by a mix of frustration and embarrassment. Greg's questions weren't rhetorical. They were pointed, forcing her to confront the flaws in her own argument. Greg wrapped up his thoughts with a final observation. Mocking someone because they're young doesn't make you look strong, it makes you look scared. Scared of change, scared of new ideas, scared of being challenged. But here's the thing. Progress doesn't wait for anyone. If you're not willing to embrace it, someone else will. The line landed like a hammer, leaving the Congresswoman with little room to maneuver. She tried to recover, tossing out vague comments about respecting process and valuing tradition, but her words felt hollow, especially after Greg's laser-focused critique. The audience could see right through her attempts to pivot, and their reactions made it clear whose side they were on. Backstage, the young strategist who had been at the center of the controversy watched the exchange unfold. She felt a mix of emotions, gratitude for Greg's defense, frustration over the initial attack, and pride in knowing that her work mattered. Watching Greg dismantle the Congresswoman's argument was empowering, a reminder that standing up for yourself didn't mean you had to do it alone. As the segment drew to a close, the mood in the studio had shifted completely. What had started as a heated debate had turned into a powerful moment of reflection. Greg Gutfeld had taken the Congresswoman's dismissive comments and turned them into a broader conversation about respect, opportunity, and the importance of giving young voices a seat at the table. And in doing so, he had reminded everyone watching that words matter, especially when they come from a place of authority. The audience left that night feeling inspired, not just by Greg's defense of the young strategist, but by the larger message he had delivered. It was a lesson about fairness, accountability, and the responsibility we all share to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. And as the cameras cut to commercial, one thing was certain. The impact of Greg's words would be felt long after the show ended. As Greg Gutfeld wrapped up his final remarks, the studio audience erupted into applause that felt like it could shake the walls. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a full-throated cheer, the kind that comes when people feel they've witnessed something real, something meaningful. Some in the crowd even stood up, whistling and shouting their approval. The energy was electric, and it was clear that Greg had struck a chord, not just with those in the room, but with viewers watching from home. Social media exploded almost instantly. Clips of Greg's takedown began circulating online within minutes, shared by fans who wanted others to see what they'd just witnessed. Hashtags like Respect Young Voices, Cheer Greg for the Win, and Youth in Politics trended across platforms, drawing thousands of comments. People praised Greg for standing up not just for one person, but for an entire generation of young leaders who often found themselves dismissed or underestimated. Memes started popping up too, capturing Greg's calm, yet cutting delivery, with captions like, "When someone tells you to sit down, but you know your time has come." Viewers flooded the comment sections of news outlets and talk shows covering the segment. One person wrote, "Finally, someone called out this hypocrisy. Age doesn't determine value. actions do. Another added, Greg didn't just defend her. He reminded us all why it's important to listen to fresh ideas. Even some who didn't always agree with Greg's politics admitted that he'd handled the situation brilliantly. I don't always side with him, one viewer tweeted, but tonight he was spot on. Back in the studio, the co-hosts exchanged glances, clearly impressed by how Greg had turned the conversation around. One of them leaned toward the Congresswoman and said lightly, "That was quite the response." The Congresswoman forced a smile, though her discomfort was obvious. She tried to brush it off, saying, "Well, I stand by my points," but her voice lacked conviction. You could tell she knew she'd been outplayed, and everyone at the table seemed aware of it too. Meanwhile, the young strategist who had been mocked earlier watched the segment unfold from home, scrolling through the flood of supportive messages pouring in. Her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, texts, tweets, emails, and direct messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers offering encouragement. "Keep going," one message read. "Your voice matters more than they realize." Another said, "Don't let anyone tell you that you're too young to make a difference." She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was grateful for the overwhelming support. On the other, she couldn't help but feel frustrated that her work had been reduced to a debate about her age rather than her ideas. But as she scrolled through the responses, something shifted inside her. Instead of letting the negativity weigh her down, she felt empowered. Greg's defense wasn't just about her, it was a reminder that she wasn't alone. Countless others had faced similar challenges and kept pushing forward. His words gave her strength not just to keep speaking up, but to embrace the role she played in inspiring others. Even outside the world of politics, the exchange resonated with people from all walks of life. Teachers, parents, and mentors chimed in, sharing stories about young people they'd seen step up and make a difference despite facing doubt or criticism. A high school coach tweeted about a student athlete who led her team to victory after being told she wasn't ready. A small business owner posted about hiring a young employee who transformed their company with innovative ideas. These anecdotes poured in, turning the moment into something bigger than anyone had anticipated, a celebration of resilience, determination, replies. In the days that followed, the fallout from the heated exchange on the 5 was impossible to ignore. The Congresswoman found herself in the middle of a media storm, with her comments replayed endlessly across news channels and social platforms. Clips of Greg Gutfeld's sharp rebuttal were everywhere, often accompanied by captions like "mic drop moment" or "this is how you handle hypocrisy." For someone who prided herself on being a strong public figure, the backlash stung. At first, she tried to brush it off. During interviews, she dismissed the criticism as overblown, insisting that her remarks had been taken out of context. "I wasn't attacking anyone personally," she said during one appearance. "I was simply pointing out that experience matters." But no matter how many times she repeated this line, it didn't seem to stick. Her attempts to reframe the narrative only fueled more scrutiny, with critics accusing her of dodging accountability. Social media users weren't letting her off the hook either. Threads popped up dissecting her past statements, highlighting moments where she had benefited from opportunities early in her career, opportunities she hadn't necessarily earned through decades of experience. One viral post featured side-by-side images, a young photo of her accepting an award for emerging leadership alongside a screenshot of her recent dismissive comments about the young strategist. The caption read, "Funny how things change when you're the one getting called out." Meanwhile, the young strategist at the center of the controversy saw her profile rise dramatically. Invitations poured in for her to appear on podcasts, TV shows, and panel discussions. Organizations she supported reported a surge in donations, with people eager to back causes aligned with her vision. Even those who didn't fully agree with her politics admired her resilience and determination. She became a symbol of what could happen when you refuse to let negativity define you, a lesson that resonated far beyond political circles. Greg Gutfeld, too, found himself in the spotlight, not that he minded. Viewers praised him for using his platform to stand up for fairness and principle, regardless of party lines. Clips of his takedown were shared widely, with many calling it one of his best moments on the show. Some even joked that he should get hazard pay for taking on such tough debates week after week. His ability to balance humor with thoughtful critique earned him new fans, including some who had never watched the many before. But perhaps the most significant impact was felt among younger audiences. High school students, college graduates, and early career professionals took to social media to share their own stories of being underestimated because of their age. A teacher posted about a student who had organized a community cleanup project despite being told they were too young to lead. A tech entrepreneur recounted how they'd pitched an idea to investors only to be laughed out of the room until the concept became a multi-million-dollar success. These anecdotes created a ripple effect, reminding everyone that talent and drive don't come with expiration dates. Even within political circles, the debate sparked a broader conversation about gatekeeping. Pundits and analysts weighed in, questioning whether dismissing young voices was doing more harm than good. Some argued that diversity of perspective, including generational diversity, was essential for progress. Others pointed out that shutting down newcomers risked alienating entire demographics, especially younger voters who increasingly demanded authenticity and action over empty rhetoric. It was clear that the incident had struck a nerve, forcing people to reflect on how they viewed leadership and opportunity. For the Congresswoman, the pressure mounted. Her approval ratings among younger voters plummeted, and critics began questioning whether her combative style was effective or merely divisive. Calls for an apology grew louder, though she initially resisted. Behind the scenes, advisors urged her to address the situation head-on, warning that ignoring it would only make things worse. Reluctantly, she issued a vague statement acknowledging that her words may have been misinterpreted and expressing respect for all individuals working hard to contribute. While some accepted it as a step forward, others saw it as too little, too late. On the flip side, the young strategist continued to gain momentum. She used her newfound platform wisely, speaking candidly about the challenges of navigating criticism, while staying true to your values. In interviews, she credited Greg's defense not just for uplifting her, but for validating the struggles of countless others in similar positions. "It's not easy to keep going when people tell you you're not ready," she said during one appearance. "But if you believe in what you're doing, you can't let them silence you." As the dust settled, it became clear that the exchange had shifted something fundamental. What started as a personal attack had evolved into a larger movement celebrating the power of young voices. People talked less about the Congresswoman's misstep and more about why it mattered to support emerging leaders. The episode served as a wake-up call for many, proving that moments of conflict can sometimes lead to meaningful change, if we're willing to listen. By the end of the week, the story had made its mark, not just on those directly involved, but on anyone paying attention. It was a reminder that words carry weight, actions have consequences, and standing up for what's right can inspire others to do the same. And while the Congresswoman might have hoped the controversy would fade quickly, its impact lingered, shaping conversations for weeks to come. As the dust settled on the heated exchange, it became clear that this wasn't just another fleeting moment of TV drama. It was a story with lessons that resonated far beyond the confines of a studio or a single news cycle. People were talking, not just about what had happened, but about why it mattered. The incident served as a mirror, reflecting how we treat each other, especially when differences in age, experience, or perspective come into play. For the Congresswoman, the aftermath was humbling. She had walked into the debate confident in her stance, only to find herself blindsided by the backlash. Her attempt to dismiss a younger voice as inexperienced had backfired spectacularly, exposing a deeper issue: the danger of underestimating others based on superficial criteria like age. In hindsight, many wondered if her comments stemmed from insecurity rather than genuine concern. After all, history is full of examples where young leaders, often dismissed at first, went on to change the world. Was she afraid of being overshadowed? Or was it simply a case of forgetting what it felt like to be new and unproven? Whatever the reason, the experience seemed to leave its mark on her. While she never fully admitted fault, those close to her said the episode prompted some soul-searching. It forced her to confront uncomfortable questions about how she used her platform and whether she was truly fostering growth, or just guarding her territory. For someone who prided herself on being a strong leader, the realization that her words could alienate instead of inspire must have been sobering. On the flip side, the young strategist emerged stronger and more determined than ever. The controversy could have derailed her. Instead, it propelled her forward. She learned firsthand the power of resilience, proving that staying true to your values can turn even the toughest moments into opportunities for growth. But perhaps, the most important lesson she took away was the value of community. Knowing that so many people stood behind her gave her courage when self-doubt crept in. "You don't have to face criticism alone," she later reflected during an interview. "There are always people rooting for you, even if you can't see them." Greg Gutfeld's role in the story also left a lasting impression. His defense of the young strategist wasn't just about calling out hypocrisy. It was about reminding everyone of the importance of fairness and respect. He showed that standing up for someone doesn't mean agreeing with everything they say. It means recognizing their right to be heard. His approach, calm, logical, and laced with humor, demonstrated how to challenge ideas without resorting to personal attacks. Viewers walked away not just entertained but inspired, reminded that leadership isn't about tearing others down, but lifting them up. The broader takeaway, though, extended beyond the individuals involved. The incident sparked conversations about how society views youth and innovation. Too often, young voices are dismissed as naive or untested, their contributions overlooked because they haven't yet accumulated decades of experience. But progress rarely waits for permission. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came from people who dared to step up before they were ready. By mocking a young leader, the Congresswoman unintentionally highlighted why it's crucial to embrace fresh perspectives instead of fearing them. Parents, teachers, and mentors took note too. Many shared stories about children or students who had faced similar doubts, but persevered anyway. A father posted online about his daughter, a high school senior who had organized a charity event despite classmates telling her it would fail. "She proved them wrong," he wrote, "and now I'm prouder than ever." These anecdotes reinforced the idea that encouragement matters, that believing in someone can make all the difference when they're struggling to believe in themselves. Even within political circles, the debate prompted reflection. Pundits and analysts began questioning long-held assumptions about gatekeeping and representation. Why do we insist on rigid timelines for success? Who gets to decide when someone is ready? These discussions opened doors for rethinking how we mentor and support emerging talent, emphasizing collaboration over competition. Leaders who once clung tightly to tradition started considering ways to include younger voices in decision-making processes, realizing that diversity of thought benefits everyone. In the end, the story served as a powerful reminder of the ripple effects our actions can create. Words matter. They can build bridges or burn them down. Respect matters. It costs nothing but means everything. And opportunity matters, because you never know which young person might hold the key to solving tomorrow's problems. As weeks turned into months, the headlines faded, but the impact endured. The Congresswoman adjusted her tone in future debates, choosing her words more carefully. The young strategist continued to rise, using her platform to advocate for policies that empowered others. And Greg Gutfeld? He went back to doing what he does best, making people think while making them laugh. But the real victory belonged to everyone watching. They saw that standing up for fairness isn't just about winning arguments. It's about creating a culture where everyone has a chance to shine. Whether you were a seasoned politician, a budding strategist, or just someone scrolling through social media, the message was clear. Respect goes a long way, and progress thrives when we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. In the days that followed the heated exchange on live television, the ripple effects of what had happened began to spread far and wide. People couldn't stop talking about it, whether at dinner tables, in online forums, or even during casual conversations at work. The host who had calmly but firmly dismantled the mockery was now being celebrated for his poise and wit. Meanwhile, the lawmaker found herself under intense scrutiny as her words replayed over and over again across social media platforms. On one of his next shows, Greg Gutfeld decided to address the situation directly. He didn't do it with anger or resentment. Instead, he spoke with calmness and clarity. Sitting behind his desk, he looked straight into the camera and said, "Look, I don't think anyone wins when we attack each other personally. Politics is already divisive enough without adding insults to the mix. If we want real progress, we need to focus on ideas, not tear people down based on their age or background." His tone was measured, almost fatherly, as if he were giving advice to a younger generation watching him. He went on to explain why he felt so strongly about respecting others, regardless of where they stood politically. "Everyone starts somewhere," he reminded viewers. "Even the most seasoned leaders once faced criticism early in their careers. It's part of growing. But belittling someone doesn't make your argument stronger. It just makes you look small." This message resonated deeply with many people, especially those who admired his ability to stay composed under pressure. By choosing to emphasize civility, Gutfeld managed to turn a contentious moment into a teachable one. On the other side, Jasmine Crockett also attempted to respond to the backlash she was facing. During an interview on another network, she addressed the controversy head-on. "Let me be clear," she began, leaning slightly forward in her chair. "I wasn't trying to demean anyone. Sometimes my passion gets the better of me, and maybe I came off the wrong way. That wasn't my intention." While her apology sounded sincere to some, others weren't convinced. Critics pointed out that her explanation seemed more like damage control than genuine remorse. Her comments sparked mixed reactions online. Some supporters rallied behind her, arguing that she was simply expressing her opinions and shouldn't be vilified for it. Others, however, dug deeper into her past statements and found instances where similar criticisms had been leveled against her earlier in her career. These discoveries only fueled the debate further, with many questioning whether she truly understood the impact of her words. One commenter summed it up neatly: "If you don't want to be judged harshly, perhaps you shouldn't judge others so harshly." Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt, the young commentator at the center of the storm, chose not to engage directly in the drama. Instead, she focused on continuing her work, appearing on various programs to discuss policy issues rather than personalities. Her quiet determination earned her respect from both sides of the aisle. Supporters praised her resilience, noting how she handled the situation with grace despite the public ridicule. For many, she became a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that staying true to yourself can often speak louder than any rebuttal. As the dust settled, the incident left a lasting impression on everyone involved. Viewers began reflecting on how they approached disagreements in their own lives. Social media threads filled up with stories of personal growth and lessons learned. One user shared how they used to dismiss opposing viewpoints outright, but now realized the value of listening before reacting. Another recounted a time when they regretted mocking someone and resolved to do better moving forward. These heartfelt reflections showed that the conversation wasn't just about politics, it was about humanity. For Greg Gutfeld, the experience reinforced his belief in the power of respectful dialogue. He knew that not every debate would end neatly or lead to agreement, but he also understood that civility could bridge divides. His willingness to stand up for fairness, even when it meant confronting a fellow guest, earned him admiration beyond his usual fan base. Many credited him with setting an example of how to handle conflict without resorting to hostility. Jasmine Crockett, too, seemed to take something away from the ordeal. Though her initial response drew criticism, she appeared more mindful in subsequent appearances. She avoided inflammatory language and focused on presenting her arguments in a clearer, less confrontational manner. Whether this shift stemmed from genuine reflection or strategic recalibration remained unclear, but observers noted the change nonetheless. Ultimately, the entire episode served as a mirror held up to society. It highlighted the importance of treating others with dignity, even in moments of disagreement. It underscored the fact that while debates are inevitable, they don't have to devolve into personal attacks. And perhaps most importantly, it reminded everyone that words carry weight. They can build bridges or burn them down. By the time the headlines faded and new controversies took center stage, the legacy of that night lingered quietly in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. It wasn't just a clash of ideologies or egos, it was a lesson in empathy, humility, and the enduring value of respectful discourse. The aftermath of the heated exchange continued to ripple through society, leaving behind a trail of lessons that people carried into their daily lives. What started as a moment of tension on live television had transformed into something much bigger, a conversation about how we treat each other even when we disagree. It wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about humanity. And as time passed, the impact of that night became clearer with every passing day. For many viewers, the incident served as a wake-up call. They began to reflect on their own behavior, how they spoke to family members during arguments, how they responded to opposing viewpoints online, and even how they handled conflicts at work. One person shared a story on social media about how they used to dismiss their co-workers' ideas because they came from someone younger and less experienced. After watching the debate unfold, they realized how unfair that attitude was. "I decided to listen more and judge less," they wrote. "It made a huge difference, not just for me, but for our whole team." Others recounted moments where they had been mocked or dismissed themselves. A teacher posted about how she once felt belittled by a colleague who thought her ideas were too idealistic. She admitted that for years she let those words hold her back. But after seeing how Greg Gutfeld stood up against mockery, she felt inspired to push past self-doubt and share her thoughts again. "If someone believes in you, even when others don't, it changes everything," she wrote. Her post resonated deeply with thousands of readers who could relate to feeling underestimated. Even schools began using the incident as a teaching tool. Teachers played clips of the debate in classrooms, asking students to analyze what went wrong and how things could have been handled differently. In one high school, a civics class spent an entire week discussing the importance of respectful dialogue. The students debated passionately, some defending the lawmaker's right to express her views while others praised the host for calling out disrespect. By the end of the week, they reached a consensus. Disagreements are inevitable, but personal. Attacks should never be part of the equation. One student summed it up perfectly. "You can still win an argument without tearing someone down." In the world of politics, the incident sparked conversations among lawmakers and commentators alike. Some admitted that they often resorted to personal jabs because it got attention or boosted ratings. But after witnessing the backlash Jasmine Crockett faced, many began questioning whether the short-term gains were worth the long-term damage. A veteran political analyst noted, "Mocking someone might get you applause in the moment, but it erodes trust in the long run. People respect leaders who focus on solutions, not insults." For Karoline Leavitt, the young commentator caught in the crossfire, the experience became a turning point in her career. Instead of shrinking away from the spotlight, she leaned into it. She appeared on several programs not to retaliate or complain, but to discuss policy issues with clarity and conviction. Her calm demeanor and refusal to engage in drama won over skeptics and supporters alike. Many admired her ability to rise above the noise and stay focused on what mattered most, her message. Fans began calling her a role model for young voices, everywhere, proving that resilience often speaks louder than words. As weeks turned into months, the story took on a life of its own. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to dissecting the debate, breaking down what worked and what didn't. Late-night comedians joked about it, turning phrases from the exchange into punchlines that lingered in pop culture. Memes circulated widely, capturing both the humor and the seriousness of the moment. Yet beneath all the jokes and commentary lay a deeper truth. People craved civility. They wanted leaders, and everyday individuals, who could disagree without being disagreeable. Greg Gutfeld, too, found himself reflecting on the incident privately. While he appreciated the praise he received, he knew that his goal had never been to win an argument. It was simply to remind everyone of a basic principle: kindness matters. During a quiet moment off-air, he told a close friend, "I hope people remember this not because of me, but because it made them think twice before mocking someone else." That's the real victory. His humility only added to his reputation as someone who cared more about principles than popularity. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, seemed determined to move forward. Though the backlash had stung, she appeared more mindful in her public appearances. She avoided inflammatory language and focused on presenting her arguments with greater care. Observers noted that while her tone hadn't changed completely, there was a noticeable effort to engage rather than provoke. Whether this shift was genuine or strategic, it signaled a step toward growth, and sometimes that's all anyone can ask for. By the time the headlines faded and new controversies grabbed the nation's attention, the legacy of that night remained, alive in small yet significant ways. Families sat around dinner tables discussing the importance of treating others with respect. Friends challenged each other to argue ideas instead of attacking personalities. Even strangers online paused before hitting send on a snarky comment, remembering how quickly words could hurt. Ultimately, the incident proved that moments of conflict can become catalysts for change. It showed that while debates will always exist, the way we handle them defines us. Respect isn't just a virtue, it's a choice. And every time someone chooses empathy over mockery, understanding over judgment, they honor the spirit of that unforgettable evening. Years later, when people looked back on the story, they wouldn't remember every detail of the debate. But they would remember the lesson it taught, that true strength lies not in tearing others down, but in lifting humanity up. And in a world often divided by differences, that was a reminder worth holding on to.